Why did HYBE rush to speed up Jin BTS's comeback when her mother was still lying in the hospital? What is really going on behind Jin's forced smile before the fans? Is this a form of tacit betrayal of the agency towards its own artists? This shocking fact will shake the world of K-pop, especially for ARMY, who has always believed that Jin is always prioritized. But what if the reality is the opposite? The smile looks so sincere on the screen. Her hair is now shorter, her uniform is still official, and her eyes seem to imply happiness. But are we all just fooled by too neat imaging? Is Jin's smile when greeting fans after his military service really sincere? Or is it just a mask to cover the wounds that never had time to heal? No one thought that Jin's return to the entertainment stage was not as sweet as it seemed. Behind the applause, flowers, and congratulations, there are tears held back. In fact, even more sadly, this fact was never officially released by the HYBE. They never mentioned that Jin's mother was in intensive care in the hospital when her comeback schedule was suddenly brought forward. The question, why? Is this a deliberate strategy? Or is there another pressure that makes Jin unable to say no? This fact first emerged not from major media or official statements, but from the expression of Jin's own eyes. That blank stare was caught on camera as he bowed in front of fans. The vibrations of his voice were almost broken when he said, "I miss you guys." For most of the fans, it was a sweet greeting. But for those paying deeper attention, it was the inner scream of a child whose heart was still at the side of her mother's hospital bed. Why didn't HYBE announce this condition? Are they afraid of missing the golden moment of promotion? Or do they know that if the public knows the real situation, then there will be a wave of empathy that turns into anger? And even more surprising, it turned out that Jin had asked for a delay in his comeback. A longtime staffer who worked behind the scenes revealed anonymously that Jin had voiced his desire to be given more time to be with his mother. However, the request was hushed up. Not denied, but also not granted. Everything went on as usual, like no one was fighting life and death in a hospital bed. Jin held back his tears. He smiles when fans cheer, even laughs when asked to talk about his future plans. But behind the stage, he was alone. The cameras were deliberately kept away from his waiting room, and when asked by some senior journalists, HYBE only replied with one sentence: "Jin is fine." But is Jin really okay? This question began to haunt the global fandom when some fans noticed a drastic change in Jin's behavior. He becomes quieter, less cheerful, and often loses focus in interviews. This is no accident. This is the result of inhuman pressure. And even more painful, coming from his own home, the agency that was supposed to protect him. Meanwhile, the media has been busy proclaiming Jin's spectacular comeback, HYBE's grand strategy to welcome the new era of BTS, and even highlighting Jin's excellent fitness after the military. But none of that news alludes to the condition of the Jin family. In fact, what does all that splendor mean if behind the scenes, a child cries in silence, hiding grief just for the sake of living the commandments? And when this fact was finally leaked to the fan community, indignation exploded. ARMY from various countries expressed disappointment openly. Some even started boycotting the latest merchandise released along with Jin's comeback. They demand clarity and, more than that, demand an apology. Will HYBE speak? Or, as usual, will they cover it up with a sweet press release and photos of fake smiles? One thing is for sure, Jin never wanted fans to know. He wants to protect his mother, maintain the dignity of his family, and still live the responsibilities as a professional idol. But until when should he become a shield for a system that never gives him room to breathe? We've seen Jin cry on stage, but this time the cry was different. It's not because of an emotional song or a thank you. This is the silent cry of a person who feels that he no longer has control over his own life. How can a mother lie weak in the hospital while her most proud child is forced to perform on stage for ratings and profit? Is the industry too cruel? This story is not over. Because today, the fans are starting to make a noise. They no longer want to be witnesses of idols being blackmailed. They don't want to see Jin, or anyone from BTS, become the next victim of a system that only knows numbers and targets. And if HYBE doesn't answer soon, then this wave of anger will become an unstoppable storm. But that night, after the fans cheered and the event ended with sparkling lights, Jin did not immediately go home to the dorm or to the luxurious rest area provided by HYBE. He chose to quietly take a private car in the other direction, without excessive escort. The CCTV of the hospital in Guro district captured the fleeting moment. A man in a black hoodie, wearing a mask, stood for quite some time in the lobby of the hospital, clutching a bouquet of flowers that had slightly wilted from too long a grip. That's Jin. No cameras, no staff. Only he and guilt gnaw at his inner being. He looked at his mother, who is lying with Info in her hand. The heart rate monitoring machine continues to sound slowly but firmly. Jin didn't say anything. He just sat beside the bed, staring at his mother's pale face, then slowly lowered his head and clasped the hand that had always held him in childhood, a time when Jin was not yet a global superstar and just an ordinary boy who was afraid of lightning. You know what it's like when the world is cheering for you, but the only voice you want to hear is trapped in an intensive care unit. One by one, the fans began to realize that something was wrong. Photos of Jin who are seen smiling are not a happy sign. In some close-ups, it appears that her eyes are reddened. Some fans sharply uploaded the results of the analysis of Jin's facial expressions from the moment photos taken during his first 24 hours after the comeback was announced. In one of the videos, when an MC asks, "How do you feel about coming back to the entertainment world?" Jin looked speechless for a bit longer before finally saying, "It feels like this world hasn't changed." A simple answer, but it's too deep to let it pass. The question arose like a storm. Did HYBE deliberately speed up Jin's comeback for the sake of the BTS Festa 2025 promotion they've been putting together since the beginning of the year? Did HYBE know that speeding up the schedule could have an impact on Jin's psychological condition? Why is there no press conference? Why is there no official statement about Jin's personal request to postpone? And if this is all true, then the most heartbreaking question of all is, has Jin lost his rights as a human just because of his status as an idol? One of the insiders, who had worked as a junior manager for BTS before the draft began, leaked that Jin had actually prepared a letter to deliver to fans. The letter was written by his own hand. The content was an apology for not being able to focus on a career because his mother was being treated. But the letter was never released. According to the source, the letter was cancelled at the decision of HYBE's management because it was feared that it would disrupt the positive atmosphere of the comeback moment. Not just cancelled. The letter was even kept tightly closed and was not allowed to be delivered. Jin is silent. He can't fight a system bigger than himself. Meanwhile, representatives of HYBE declined to comment. In a brief conference call, a spokesperson said only, "We are very supportive of Jin and will always give our best." A sentence that sounds empty, given the fact that Jin's mother is still in intensive care and none of the management representatives were seen accompanying Jin at the hospital on the first day of his comeback. Then came the moment that changed everything.